For most of modern history, scientists believe they understood how civilization began. The story seems simple. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans lived as small bands of hunter-gatherers. They wandered the land in search of food, built temporary shelters, and left behind little evidence of complex society. Then, about 12,000 years ago, something changed. Humans discovered agriculture. Farming allowed people to stay in one place. Villages formed, populations grew. Eventually, cities appeared. From those cities came writing, government, religion, and the rise of civilization itself. That story became the foundation of modern archaeology. But in recent decades, something strange has begun to emerge from the earth. Across the Middle East, archaeologists have uncovered structures that do not fit the timeline. Massive stone monuments, sophisticated carvings, temples that predate agriculture, sites so ancient that they challenge everything we thought we knew about the birth of civilization. And at the center of this mystery lies one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries ever made, a site known as Göbekli Tepe. Discovered in the 1990s on a remote hilltop in southeastern Turkey, Göbekli Tepe stunned archaeologists almost immediately. The site contains enormous T-shaped pillars carved from limestone. Many of these pillars stand more than 16 feet tall. Some weigh up to 20 tons. They are arranged in massive circular enclosures, forming what appear to be ritual spaces or temples. But the most shocking part of the discovery was not the scale of the architecture. It was the age. Radiocarbon dating revealed that Göbekli Tepe is more than 11,000 years old. That places its construction around 9600 BC. To put that into perspective, Göbekli Tepe was built 7,000 years before Stonehenge, 6,000 years before the pyramids of Egypt, and thousands of years before the first known cities. According to traditional history, people living at that time were supposed to be primitive hunter-gatherers. Yet somehow these hunter-gatherers carved enormous stone pillars, transported them across the landscape, and arranged them into complex ceremonial structures. Each pillar is covered with intricate carvings: foxes, snakes, scorpions, wild boar, birds with outstretched wings. Some carvings appear almost symbolic, as if they were communicating something beyond simple decoration. The pillars themselves even resemble stylized human figures. Arms are carved along the sides. Hands meet across the front. Some pillars wear belts and loincloths. These towering stones may represent ancient beings watching over the site. Who built them? And more importantly, why? For decades, archaeologists believed that agriculture led to civilization. People settled down to farm. Then they built temples. But Göbekli Tepe suggests the opposite may have happened. The temple came first. Only later did farming appear. In other words, large religious gatherings may have inspired humans to settle in one place and develop agriculture in order to support those gatherings. If that theory is correct, the implications are enormous. It would mean that organized religion, not farming, was the true spark that ignited civilization. But Göbekli Tepe may only be part of a much larger story. In recent years, archaeologists working in the same region of Turkey have discovered several additional sites from the same era. One of the most intriguing is Karahan Tepe. Located roughly 30 miles from Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe contains similar stone pillars and ritual structures, but the carvings found here are even more unusual. One statue discovered at the site depicts a life-size human head emerging from the ground. Another shows a seated figure surrounded by carved pillars. Some researchers believe the statues may represent mythological beings or ancestors. Others think they could be early depictions of gods. But what truly fascinates archaeologists is the scale of the discoveries. These sites appear to be part of a much larger cultural network, a series of monumental settlements stretching across southeastern Turkey. Collectively, archaeologists now refer to this region as the Taş Tepeler, or Stone Hills. More than a dozen sites have already been identified, and many have barely been excavated, which raises a haunting question. If complex ritual centers existed here 12,000 years ago, how advanced were the people who built them? To answer that question, we have to travel back to the end of the last ice age. Around 20,000 years ago, much of the northern hemisphere was covered in massive glaciers. These ice sheets stretched across North America, Europe, and parts of Asia. But beginning around 12,000 years ago, the planet began to warm rapidly. glaciers melted, sea levels rose, entire landscapes disappeared beneath the oceans. Some scientists believe this period may have included catastrophic floods and climate disruptions. One proposed explanation is known as the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. According to this theory, fragments of a comet may have struck Earth roughly 12,800 years ago. The impact would have triggered massive fires, atmospheric dust clouds, and a sudden cooling period known as the Younger Dryas. Some researchers argue that such an event could have devastated human populations across the globe. If advanced Ice Age cultures existed, their settlements may have been destroyed or buried beneath rising seas. While the hypothesis remains debated, the timing is intriguing. Göbekli Tepe appears shortly after this turbulent climatic period, almost as if a new civilization was emerging from the aftermath of catastrophe. But the mystery deepens when we look beyond Turkey. Around the world, archaeologists have uncovered ancient structures that seem far older and more sophisticated than previously believed. Consider the site of Pumapunku. Located high in the Andes Mountains near Lake Titicaca, Pumapunku is famous for its massive stone blocks. Some weigh more than 100 tons. Many are cut with astonishing precision. Some stones contain perfectly straight grooves and drilled holes that resemble modern machining. For decades, archaeologists believed the site belonged to the Tiwanaku civilization, which flourished around 500 AD. But newer research suggests parts of the complex may be significantly older. The stonework itself raises questions. How did ancient builders shape such massive blocks with such precision? And how were they transported across difficult terrain? Then there is the mysterious underwater structure near Japan known as the Yonaguni Monument. Discovered in 1986 by a diver exploring the seafloor, the formation resembles a stepped pyramid rising from the ocean floor. It features flat terraces, sharp angles, and what appear to be carved stairways. Some researchers believe it may be a natural rock formation shaped by geological processes. Others argue that the structure shows clear signs of human modification. If it is man-made, it would have been constructed thousands of years ago when sea levels were lower, long before the rise of known civilizations. Another puzzling site lies beneath the waters off the coast of India. Near the Gulf of Khambhat, sonar scans revealed what appear to be geometric structures buried beneath layers of sediment. Some researchers have proposed that the site may represent an ancient submerged city. If confirmed, it could date back more than 9,000 years. But as with many underwater discoveries, the evidence remains controversial. Still, taken together, these findings paint a curious picture. Across the globe, there are hints that human societies may have been building large structures far earlier than we once believed. Not scattered tribes struggling to survive, but organized communities capable of monumental construction, and perhaps even complex belief systems. The question is not simply when civilization began. The real question may be whether civilization has begun more than once. Ancient myths from cultures around the world tell stories of earlier ages of humanity, lost worlds destroyed by floods, civilizations wiped away by catastrophe, and survivors who carried fragments of knowledge into a new era. The ancient Greeks spoke of Atlantis, a powerful island civilization said to have vanished beneath the sea. In Hindu tradition, ancient texts describe cycles of creation and destruction, spanning immense periods of time. The Mayans believed previous worlds had existed before our own. Even in Mesopotamian mythology, the Epic of Gilgamesh describes a great flood sent to wipe out humanity. These stories were long dismissed as legends, but today, rising sea levels since the end of the Ice Age are a scientific fact. More than 400 feet of ocean rise has occurred since the last glacial maximum. Entire coastal regions that once supported human populations now lie underwater. If ancient settlements existed along those coasts, they would be almost impossible to find today. Buried beneath sediment, hidden beneath miles of ocean, lost to history. And yet, discoveries like Göbekli Tepe suggest that something extraordinary was happening at the dawn of the Holocene. A sudden burst of symbolic art, monumental architecture, and ritual spaces unlike anything seen before. Almost as if humanity was remembering something or rebuilding something that had been lost. If Göbekli Tepe stood alone, archaeologists might dismiss it as an anomaly, a strange ritual site built by unusually organized hunter-gatherers. But Göbekli Tepe is not alone. Across southeastern Turkey, archaeologists are uncovering more sites that appear to belong to the same mysterious culture. Together, these sites form a network known as the Taş Tepeler region, and the more researchers dig, the more complex this ancient world appears to become. One of the most striking discoveries is the site known as Karahan Tepe. At first glance, Karahan Tepe resembles Göbekli Tepe. It contains large stone pillars arranged in circular structures, but deeper excavation has revealed something even stranger. Dozens of stone pillars appear to have been carved directly from the bedrock itself. Instead of transporting stones to the site, ancient builders may have shaped the landscape around them. In one chamber, archaeologists discovered a series of upright stone phallus statues surrounding a central human head emerging from the floor. The arrangement appears highly symbolic, perhaps ritualistic, perhaps mythological, but clearly deliberate. Another sculpture found at the site depicts a crouching human figure with exaggerated facial features and piercing eyes. The statue seems almost lifelike, uncomfortably so. These carvings suggest that the people who built these monuments were not simply constructing shelters or gathering places. They were expressing ideas, beliefs, stories, something complex enough to require permanent stone architecture. Which raises a troubling question. How could people who supposedly had no cities, no farming, and no writing organize the labor required to build such places? The pillars at Göbekli Tepe weigh up to 20 tons. Quarrying, shaping, and transporting stones of that size requires planning, coordination, hundreds of workers, food supplies for those workers, tools, knowledge passed between generations. These are the hallmarks of organized societies. Yet according to conventional history, such societies did not exist at that time. So what changed? To understand the possible answer, we have to examine the world at the end of the last ice age. Roughly 12,000 years ago, the Earth entered a period of dramatic environmental transformation. Glaciers that had covered large portions of the planet for thousands of years began to melt rapidly. As the ice disappeared, vast quantities of water poured into the oceans. Sea levels rose, coastlines moved inland, entire ecosystems shifted. For people living at the time, the changes must have been enormous. River systems changed course. Animals migrated or disappeared. Coastal regions where humans had lived for generations were gradually submerged beneath the sea. In fact, modern scientists estimate that global sea levels rose more than 400 feet between the height of the last ice age and today. That means the ancient coastline of the Ice Age world lies far beneath the modern ocean. If early civilizations had developed along those coasts, their settlements would now be underwater, hidden beneath sediment, buried beneath coral reefs, invisible to archaeologists who typically search on land. But occasionally, the ocean gives up its secrets. One of the most intriguing underwater structures discovered in recent decades lies off the coast of Japan near Yonaguni Island. Divers exploring the area in the 1980s discovered a massive stepped formation rising from the seafloor. The structure features flat terraces, sharp angles, and formations that resemble staircases and walls. The formation is now known as the Yonaguni Monument. Geologists remain divided about its origin. Some argue that the formation is the result of natural fracturing in sandstone layers. Others believe the structure shows evidence of human modification. If the structure was built by humans, it would have been constructed when sea levels were far lower, more than 10,000 years ago. That would place it roughly in the same time frame as Göbekli Tepe, but Yonaguni is not the only underwater mystery. In the Mediterranean Sea near Egypt lies the submerged city of Thonis Herakleion. Once a thriving port at the mouth of the Nile, Thonis Herakleion sank beneath the sea more than 1,000 years ago due to earthquakes and soil liquefaction. Divers exploring the site have recovered statues, temples, and shipwrecks preserved beneath layers of sediment. The discovery demonstrated something important. Entire cities can vanish beneath the ocean and remain hidden for centuries. If that can happen in recorded history, imagine what might lie beneath the oceans from 10,000 years ago. But perhaps the most compelling clues about ancient civilizations come not from archaeology alone, they come from mythology. Stories told across cultures separated by thousands of miles. Stories that describe eerily similar events. One of the most widespread myths in human history is the story of a great flood. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero encounters a survivor of a catastrophic flood that wiped out nearly all of humanity. In the Hebrew Bible, the story appears as the tale of Noah and the Ark. In Hindu tradition, a similar flood myth tells of the god Vishnu warning a man named Manu to build a boat to survive a coming catastrophe. Even in the Americas, flood myths appear in the oral traditions of indigenous cultures. Different continents, different languages, but the same story. A world destroyed by water. Survivors who carry knowledge into the next age. For centuries, scholars dismissed these stories as symbolic religious narratives. But today, some researchers wonder if these myths might contain distant memories of real events. Memories passed down through generations. Stories that began with actual disasters at the end of the Ice Age. As glaciers melted and sea levels rose, coastal communities may have been forced to abandon their homes. Floods could have destroyed settlements. Entire regions could have been lost to the ocean. For people living through such events, the destruction would have seemed apocalyptic, the end of their world. And yet, humans survived. They moved inland. They adapted. They rebuilt. Perhaps places like Göbekli Tepe represent the efforts of survivors attempting to preserve knowledge, rituals, and identity in a changed world. If that idea is correct, it suggests something remarkable. Civilization may not have begun once. It may have begun many times. Human societies rise. They develop technologies, cultures, and belief systems. But under the right conditions, those societies can collapse. Natural disasters, climate shifts, war, disease. When collapse happens, knowledge can vanish with astonishing speed. Cities decay, languages disappear, technologies are forgotten. Within a few generations, even the memory of a civilization can fade into legend. All that remains are scattered ruins, fragments of myth, and questions buried beneath the earth. Today, archaeologists estimate that only a tiny fraction of ancient sites have been discovered. Many remain buried beneath modern cities. Others lie hidden in dense jungles. Still more rest beneath the oceans. Every year, new discoveries challenge our assumptions about the past. Ancient settlements older than expected. Monuments built with unexpected sophistication. Artifacts that suggest cultural connections between distant regions. The deeper we dig into human history, the more complicated the story becomes. The simple narrative of primitive tribes slowly evolving into civilization is beginning to look incomplete. Instead, the archaeological record hints at something far more dynamic. A history shaped by cycles, advancement, collapse, renewal. And somewhere in that cycle, perhaps long before the first cities of Mesopotamia, there may have existed cultures more advanced than we once believed. Not necessarily advanced in the sense of modern technology, but advanced in organization, symbolism, architecture, and belief. Göbekli Tepe may represent the earliest surviving chapter of that story. But it is unlikely to be the first. Only 5% of the site has been excavated. 95% still lies buried beneath the hill, waiting. And as archaeologists continue to explore the Taş-Tepeler region, more sites are emerging from the ground. Each discovery adds new pieces to the puzzle. Each discovery raises new questions. Who were these people? How far did their culture spread? What knowledge did they possess? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all. If complex societies existed before the dawn of recorded history, what else might we have forgotten? Civilization may not be a straight line of progress stretching from primitive tribes to modern society. It may be something far more fragile, a pattern that repeats, a flame that rises, flickers, and sometimes fades, only to ignite again in a different age. If that is true, then the ruins scattered across the planet are not simply relics of the past. They are warnings, proof that civilizations can disappear, and reminders that history may be far older than we imagine. The deeper we dig, the more we realize something unsettling. We may not be the first civilization to walk this path. We may simply be the latest. And somewhere beneath the earth, The earlier chapters of humanity's story are still waiting to be found.